Thousands of players were ready for a new horror obsession, or a new ASIM obsession. It was supposed to be a chaotic and colorful alternative in a sea of grim, serious titles, based on one of the most beloved cult classic horror films of the 80s. So, how is it that just months after launch, Killer Klowns from Outer Space the game is a virtual ghost town? On Steam, its initial peak of over 3,300 players evaporated. The player count has plummeted, with recent daily numbers that can sometimes struggle to break 20 concurrent players. I'm pretty sure the unofficial continuation of Evolve Stage 2 has more players than Killer Klowns does. The circus left town almost as fast as it arrived. This wasn't a slow decline, it was a collapse. And today, we're going to uncover the critical mistakes, the baffling design flaws, and the broken promises that turned a dream game into a digital graveyard. Before we get into all that, I want to quickly ask that if you enjoy the content, please take a second to like the video. And if you're on mobile, you can swipe left on the comments to help hype the video up. It really does help. When it was announced back in 2022, Killer Klowns from Outer Space the game had a lot going for it. The developer, IllFonic, was a seasoned veteran of asymmetrical horror, the same studio behind the wildly popular Friday the 13th the game. Partnering with TerraVision Games, they were adapting an IP that was practically begging for a video game. The 1988 film is a perfect display of horror comedy, and the game promised to capture that same zany, terrifying energy. The hype was built on a simple twist to the genre's formula. Instead of the usual 4 versus 1 dynamic you see in games like Dead by Daylight, Killer Klowns proposed a chaotic 3 versus 7 matchup. 3 players would get to be the clowns, armed with cotton candy ray guns and balloon animal dogs, while 7 human players scrambled to survive and escape the invasion of Crescent Cove. This idea alone generated huge excitement. It promised a less sweaty, more casual experience. The early reviews reflected this optimism. Game Informer called it a good asymmetrical multiplayer game, and IGN praised its chaotic, unabashedly goofy competitive matches. Matches that had them screaming with delight. The game was positioned as a genuine contender in a genre desperate for fresh blood. The stage was set for a spectacular clown show. The game launched on June 4th, 2024, and it had a solid start. It pulled in a peak of over 3,300 concurrent players on Steam, a respectable number for a niche title. In those first few days, the vision seemed to be working. The core gameplay was fun and faithful to the movie. As a human, you'd frantically search for items like spark plugs and gas cans to get one of 4 escape routes working. As a clown, you'd hunt humans, wrap them in cotton candy cocoons, and hook them up to generators to power the Clownpocalypse, an instant win. The design even included some clever ideas to help keep things fresh. Humans could actually fight back, stunning and even killing clowns who had painfully long respawn timers. This empowered the survivors in a way few other games in the genre did. A little bit of foreshadowing, we'll get into that later. And for dramatic ending, if the 15-minute timer got low, the Terenzi brothers would crash their ice cream truck through a wall for a last-ditch escape, similar to The Hatch. On paper, it was a recipe for endless fun. For a moment, it really seemed like IllFonic had another hit, but that's where the problems began, and they started piling up really fast. Even before the official launch, some outlets raised concerns about the game's longevity and pointed out some really nasty bugs that ranged from visual glitches to game-breaking crashes. This was a huge red flag. While the initial player numbers looked good, the actual experience was riddled with issues that players discovered all too quickly. The collapse of Killer Klowns wasn't because of one single thing, but a whole cascade of failures that pushed its player base away with shocking speed. It really all boils down to 3 areas where the game just completely fumbled. The 3 rings of a circus. First, and most importantly, the game balance was a disaster. The core idea of humans fighting back, which sounded good on paper, totally undermined the horror. Tell me where we've seen that before. Reddit threads and Steam forums quickly filled with complaints that humans were way too overpowered. Coordinated teams of humans realized they could kill the clowns with ridiculous ease. This, plus that super long respawn timer for clowns, created a bizarro world scenario where the monsters were the ones getting hunted. Players sarcastically nicknamed the game Killer Humans from Planet Earth, because the power fantasy of playing a clown just wasn't there. The developers tried to fix it, but their attempts at balancing often felt like panicked overcorrections. Early on, some clown weapons were incredibly powerful, but a swift nerf made clown players angry without fixing the real problem of humans being too aggressive. This created a constant, frustrating tug of war. Every patch that tried to help the clowns was met with backlash from the human players, and every buff for the humans made playing as a clown feel miserable. This cycle is a known killer of asymmetrical games, and Killer Klowns ran straight into that trap. The second major failure was a staggering lack of content. The initial fun just wore off way too fast. IGN's review, while mostly positive, pointed this out, saying the game can wear thin pretty quick, and that after a few hours, things become pretty predictable. There were 5 maps at launch, but every map had the exact same objectives. You were always looking for the same gas cans for the boat, the same key for a gate. The gameplay loop got repetitive, and for many, boring after just a few matches. Reviewers warned from day one that the game's success would depend on solid post-launch content, but that content was slow to arrive. A roadmap was eventually released promising new maps and characters, but it felt too little too late. The player base was bleeding out, and promises of the future couldn't stop the hemorrhage happening right now. Finally, the game was plagued by technical problems. Beyond the balance, it launched with bugs that could freeze players or crash entire matches. As the player count dwindled, matchmaking for a 10-player lobby became a nightmare, forcing the game to use bots that players described as useless. The community had been asking for a role queue since before launch so they could choose to play as a clown or human, but that feature was missing, adding to the frustration. To make matters worse, some announced features like special traps for the Trapper Clown were reportedly removed before release because they couldn't be balanced, leaving players feeling like they bought an incomplete product. It's a tragic story of a game with so much potential squandered by a series of preventable mistakes. But before we get to the final verdict, I do want to hear from you. Did you play Killer Klowns from Outer Space before it died? What did you think of the balance? Was there a specific moment that made you put it down for good? Let me know in the comments below. Today, the state of Killer Klowns is bleak. From its peak of over 3,300 players on Steam, the game now sees 24-hour peaks that are often under 20 players, a staggering drop of more than 99%. Twitch viewership, which once hit an all-time peak of over 50,000, is now often in the single or double digits. The once lively circus tent is now a digital ghost town. The game is stuck in a strange limbo. The developers at IllFonic did release a content roadmap for 2024 and have pushed some updates, including new maps and cosmetics. But these updates felt like they were being released into a vacuum. The new map doesn't matter if there's nobody there to play it. The new cosmetic skins can feel like a cynical cash grab when players feel the core gameplay remains fundamentally broken. This has become a common complaint. The studio is just flooding the shop with skins instead of fixing the game's deep-seated issues. With the power of hindsight, we know that IllFonic is moving on to their next game, so this game has been basically abandoned. The game has now joined the growing graveyard of asymmetrical horror titles that have tried to challenge Dead by Daylight and failed. It's a stark reminder that a beloved IP and a fun concept aren't enough to carry a live service game. Without a stable foundation, meaningful support, and a sharp ear for what the community is saying, even the most promising shows are destined to close. So what the hell happened to Killer Klowns the game? It was a death by 1,000 cuts. A fundamentally broken balance that made playing as the game's main attraction a chore. A shallow pool of content that couldn't hold anyone's interest for more than a few weeks. And a series of technical stumbles and questionable decisions that just eroded player trust. IllFonic had the blueprint. They had the experience from Friday the 13th, but where that game's death was blamed on licensing issues, giving the studio an easy way out, there's no such excuse here. With Killer Klowns, the feeling is that IllFonic simply abandoned it rather than fixing its core problems. This has become a stain on their reputation, a stain that is now carrying forward to their next game, Halloween, which I've also made a video on. Instead of a triumphant return, they delivered a game that felt rushed, unbalanced, and ultimately unfinished. It's a cautionary tale about the brutal reality of the live service market. Hype might get you a great opening weekend, but it can't save a game that isn't fun to play in the long run, and it will kill your reputation as a developer studio. The promise of a chaotic horror comedy brawl developed into a frustrating, repetitive, and empty experience. The circus came to town, but it forgot to bring the fun. And on a final, much happier note, I want to give a massive thank you to my incredible channel members. Your generosity is making a real difference, because 100% of all income from channel memberships is donated directly to local animal shelters to help animals in need. Yes, 100%. If you'd like to be added to this list of amazing donors and help support a great cause, consider joining the channel today. Thanks to my amazing members, we were recently able to donate over $200 to help local shelter cats get adopted. So thank you all so much from the bottom of my heart. Again, I'm not keeping any of this money and I don't want to. It gives me the opportunity to give back to all the animals that have helped me through my life, and I'm just happy to be able to do that. As always, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I probably won't see you in the circus.